Hello again. Welcome to the Blazor Puzzle, episode 63. I'm Carl Franklin from AppVNext. That's Jeff Fritz from Microsoft. What's up?
How do, my friend? It's the middle of January, and it is really snowy and cold here.
Do you want to know where record snowfall was today? New Orleans.
What?
New Orleans, 11 inches in New Orleans.
I was going to answer something like Bismarck or Anchorage. New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans got 11 inches. Previously, the record was like 0.2 inches or something.
They've got a foot of snow or 25 centimeters for the rest of the world.
Yeah. And they don't know how to drive in it. They don't know what to do. So I think they've got, machines coming in from different places. I don't know. But anyway, it's crazy weather we're having.
There's got to be some hysterical TikToks of some Cajuns that are trying to get around and slipping and sliding and trudging through snow.
Yeah, I'd like to see those. All right. Of course, we've changed the format of the Blazor puzzle, so we're no longer giving you a week to figure things out and picking winners and all that stuff. However, we are awarding mugs to people who send in really good puzzles with solutions, of course. We're still sorting through a couple of those, so let's jump into this week's puzzle.
Let's do it.
All right, Jeff. So this came out of a real world situation where I've got this application state solution that uses a component. And it's not just a component, but it cascades around the app so you can implement it as a cascading parameter.
Isn't it amazing that the real world gives us the worst puzzles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this one was a little embarrassing, but not bad. So my cascading component is a code behind, essentially. I have a child content, which I'm rendering. That's a render fragment, right? And I render that inside the class. So the child content is actually, because I wrapped it around the router. If you look at Routes Razor, all of the pages now have access to, and components on those pages have access to, this cascading component. Okay. So I wanted a callback. I wanted to use an event callback with this.
Sure.
And a typical scenario would be, hey, whenever any of the properties in this state bag change, I want to notify the user. Right.
I've used a trick like this to do stuff like, hey, I'm going to let Blazor control whether it's dark or light theme. And there's a theme switch button that's in a component somewhere that sets a value on this thing, and it raises an event that goes back somewhere else and actually sets that dark light class. Yeah.
Well, that's really good when it's a non-cascading component, because you put it on the page and there's one instance of it. And an event callback is great because you can specify it right in the markup. But it's a little bit different when it's a cascading component. But anyway, I'll talk about that in a second. My event callback passes a string, and I have a timer. And if it's the first render, I set up the timer for once a second. And when it elapses, I invoke my event callback. All right. Pretty simple. So look at home again, how we're doing it here. Because we're not defining this in markup. We're not saying, hey, here's my cascading component, and by the way, here's the here's the event callback. Right? I can't really do that here because it's cascading. So instead, I'm using this event callback factory to create an event callback right here. Handle my event callback. But when you do this, only one component can monitor this. In other words, there's only one my event callback. So if I go to the toolbar, I want it in two places, right?
Yeah, like multicast delegate.
Yeah. I do the same thing in the toolbar. And so this one, when it gets the callback, should set message to the value and show it, right? But watch what happens. Okay. So it's updating here on the page, but not in the toolbar. Well, how do we know it's supposed to be in the toolbar? All right, well, check this out. I'll go back to my home page.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to comment this out. So now it's only going to be in the toolbar because the toolbar is the last one to get it, or the only one to get it, actually. So there you go. Now it's in the toolbar. Now I didn't change the code in the toolbar. I just commented out the code in Home Razor so it doesn't support the callback here. But it's either one or the other. And the reason, and I can tell you the reason without giving away the answer, the reason is because there's only one event callback because there's one instance here. It's a cascading parameter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one instance, like a scoped service.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I set it here, whatever it was set to before isn't set there anymore.
Sure. Last one in wins. Okay.
Right. And you might think you could just do this. Plus equals, like you can with events. Can't do that. So my conclusion is event callbacks in a cascading component probably aren't the answer. But what is? How can we support multiple callbacks? So this is the point where if you want to go figure it out on your own, pause right now and come back after you think you figured it out. And we'll be right back after a few seconds.
Make sure you click the link to the source code just below so you can take a look and tinker with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay, we'll be right back. All right, so there's a couple ways to do this, but the .NET way, which is not the Blazory way, is to expose an event, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, we're going to create an action of string, and it's going to be called on change. I'm getting rid of this event callback altogether. So instead of invoking my event callback, we've got this notify state changed, which if there's an on change, we invoke it, right? And I just raised that event. So that's what's changed inside here. Now that means wherever you want to hook it, you have to implement IDisposable. Because on initialize, you're going to do the old plus equals for handle my event callback. And then in dispose, you want to do a minus equals to unsubscribe from that event.
Disconnect it. Yep.
Disconnect it. The thing is, I just don't really like IDisposable in dispose. It's not very Blazory. And I wish there was a way to do it all in Blazor without having to hook and unhook events. I mean, that's why I love event callbacks, right?
Sure.
So I wish there was a way that Blazor would create a multicast event callback for cascading parameters. I guess that's what I want.
It's not so much the multicast, it's the automatic cleanup.
Yes, the automatic cleanup. That's what I want. All right, so there is another way to do this. And although this is the way that we've told people how to do it in the repo, but this is a little bonus for those of you who are watching the video and want to see another way that does not use IDispose to do it. So we'll be right back in a few seconds. Okay, so how do we do this? First of all, Jeff reminded me that I did not need the event keyword here because an action is a delegate. So I've created a string property called message. And whenever I set that message property, because this is sort of like a state bag idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I set that property, I'm going to call state has changed. Now I've also implemented this IAppState, which has one property, message, as a string, and an implementation, because you cannot deserialize to an interface. You have to have an implementation. So up here, before I get to get copy, which should be obvious, I'm going to implement IAppState, right, which is my message property. Everybody's happy. And get copy basically says, I'm going to take this, my component, cast it to IApp state, which is just the message property, serialize it, deserialize it to app state, and now I've got a copy. So it's just a little trick. If you implement iClonable, for example, you're responsible for every single property in that clone method. Yeah. And this is just a way to bypass all that. And then you can use, the attributes for serialization to control what gets in there and what doesn't.
You're guaranteed to have a value copy of things, not a reference copy.
Exactly. We don't want to we can't just say return me or return this, because that gives you access to the entire thing. We want a copy. And why? Because we want to compare it. And we can do this without IDisposable. Check this out. So I'm going to go to toolbar here and I'm going to remove IDisposable. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do this. And I'm going to create a version of that IApp state called state. And on initialized, I'll say state equals cascading component get copy. Okay. Now, where do I compare these? Well, check it out. Inside, when I mutate the state, I call state as changed, which is good because I want the UI to update. But what it also means is that everybody who's in the pool gets to re-render.
Gets notified.
Gets notified through on after render. So here I can do all my first render stuff or whatever. And then I will say, oh, and by the way, you want to do this at the end of oninitialized after you've made changes to cascading component, let's say. That's when you want to get the copy, right? So right here, we can just say if state message does not equal cascading component message, then we know it's changed. Now, the very first thing we have to do is set state message to cascading component message. Otherwise, that'll just keep firing, won't it? It'll just keep firing and firing. So do something here, because we're not just displaying cascading component message, which if we did, it would just update, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to happen when the message changes. So let's put a breakpoint here and let's go over to home. And let's add a button. All right. And a set message, which is going to say cascading component dot message equals hey now. And there we go. So now we're mutating the message, and the toolbar should break in on after render at this point right here. And whoops, we have a bug. We don't want value equals message. We want message equals value. That was a dummy on my part. All right, let's try it again. All right, here we go. Boom. Now the message equals the state message. And the reason that it doesn't update is because why? Because we didn't
call state as changed there. Right. State as changed works on the current component out.
Yes, and that's why it's very important to do this before you do this, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just going to keep refreshing and refreshing and refreshing and never change the message, your local copy. All right, last time, here we go. There it is. Okay, now, this is really important. I wanted to illustrate getting control with an event, not just so that I could update, right? Because if we just put our cascading parameter, our cascading component dot message, bind it here, it would do the same thing. It's about getting control when something changes. Mm-hmm. Like you may want to do an API call or, call some JavaScript or log something, or, you need to get control. But if you don't need to do that, all you got to do right here is cascading component message, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. You don't need any of that other stuff. This won't even do anything. Setting message won't do anything because we're not showing it anywhere. So there it is. All right. So we didn't need to do any code. We just need to bind it if we don't want control. But this demo is all about getting control when something changes. So there you go. A couple of different solutions. And if you want a more in-depth discussion of this, check out this Blazor Train video right down here. It's episode 15 of Blazor Train, which I've done over a couple of times. And if you go there now and go to this repo, give the repo to, then everything's explained a little bit more. So there you go, Jeff.
All right. Yeah, managing and balancing state in Blazor can be a tricky thing. So.
Oh, yeah, totally. And, techniques come and go and we learn and we adjust. And that's what this was all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Imagine if we had to do this with session. Ooh.
Oh, God. Yikes. All right. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. Stay warm.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out blazortrain.com and the .NETshow.com for more great content.